I know people are trickling in, but we have a lot of great material to get through. So I'm going to start off by welcoming everyone to the second installment of our NYSERDA sponsored webinar series, AI Moats and Climate Tech. We're excited to bring together both a venture capitalist and a startup founder to share insights on what investors are truly underwriting and evaluating when it comes to AI integration in companies. And sincere thank you to NYSERDA for their support in making this series possible. So welcome, everybody. My name is Katrina Kropo, and I'm the Client Services Manager here at Launch New York. Before we get started, I'd like to quickly review just a few housekeeping items. Please remain on mute during the discussion out of respect for our speakers. If you have a question during the session, feel free to drop it in the chat. I'll be monitoring that throughout. And we will reserve the final 15 minutes for Q&A, at which time you're welcome to come off mute, raise your hand, or throw another question in the chat. And we will also be recording this webinar and sharing it with all of our attendees afterwards. So with that, I'm pleased to introduce Launch New York's President and CEO, Marnie Levine, who will provide a brief overview of Launch New York and help kick off today's discussion.
Great. Thanks so much, Katrina. So with that, would love to just give you a few words about Launch New York, and again, a hearty thanks to NYSERDA, who with whom we have worked for many years, and introduced some of our services in the clean tech space because of their support, including what we're doing today. If you're not familiar with Launch New York, we are a 501(c)(3), so we're a nonprofit venture development organization who is really designed to help build the upstate New York economy and do that specifically through high growth potential deep tech companies, informatics-based companies, clean tech companies, by identifying and supporting and investing in these companies. And as you'll see shortly, we provide not only one-on-one pro bono mentorship through our Entrepreneur in Residence program, but we also do that through our investment capital as the most active seed fund in the state. So our process here at Launch New York, we do not charge for these services, but we provide one-on-one mentorship and group programming, such as today. And you simply can access that and look at more and talk to our team if you want to apply at launchy.org. I see some of our clients and our mentors and investors are part of the audience here today, so welcome. We do this process so that we can work with companies to help them become venture backable. So today is very appropriate in the sense that we're bringing to the table not only founders, but also those who invest in the founders. So if you feel you're on a track to equity capital in your pre-seed or seed stage, that's sort of our sweet spot. We welcome you to take a look at the website and apply if you feel so inclined. We, of course, have our specialty program, as I just referenced, the Emerging Clean Tech Opportunity Incubator, as well as a program for underrepresented founders called Founders Go Big. And our newest program for you all to be aware of is statewide. It is a technical assistance program that provides hands-on legal, accounting, and financial services, again, on behalf of helping companies become venture capital ready. So typically companies who are probably anywhere within a year of being able to apply for venture capital from Launch New York or others, you are a good candidate to be looking at our website and looking at the program applications that we have. And then the launch funding that I like to mention specifically for companies that are in the upstate New York region, we have available a nonprofit seed fund, a for-profit seed fund, as well as an actual syndicate of over 400 accredited investors who look at some of our great pre-seed and seed companies raising capital. So again, as the most active seed funding source in New York State, if you are eligible for working with Launch New York, I certainly encourage it. We do typically lead more than three-quarters of our first-time company investments. So I know finding a lead for your round is always tricky. So we're thrilled to do that when we can. The Clean Tech Incubator itself, we encourage you to consider when you fill out an application that you are interested in the additional services we provide. I won't go into great depth on that today, but these are just a few of the companies that have worked with Launch New York. But we have dozens and dozens who have really worked with what I'll call more extensive services, even beyond the one-on-one mentorship. And by the way, NYSERD has done a phenomenal job of helping to build the ecosystem of our colleagues who we all keep in touch monthly. We're talking about how can we help you get what you need, whether not just capital, but anything else as well. So I really encourage you, if you're not involved with some of the organizations already, please, launch is one, but there are many, many more. We are here to help you bring your innovations to market. Okay, so we are moved on to the terrific topic of today, and I'm thrilled that we've been able to continue our perspective of, really bringing to the table two sides of this conversation. We want to make sure that the founders are hearing from other founders, but we also want to make sure you're hearing from the funders and not just a Launch New York to be sure, but those who have really specialized in addressing the topic of the day, which if you've gone a day without hearing the phrase AI, I mean, I'm amazed. It is obviously where we all are hearing we need to be and need to go if we're not there today. So, with that, I'm pleased to be introducing first on the founder side, Frank Bruckner, co-founder and CEO of Meltech, which is based in Brooklyn. And Frank is really obviously the central person leading this effort there. What I want to note in particular is, while Frank is leading all the aspects of the business, the product development and the deployment of AI as well, he also, has the great, uh, I'll call it the milestone that he is a clean tech company in market. So congratulations to you, Frank, for that. Because Meltech, in fact, is Con Edison's top residential smart usage partner, helping over 6,000 customers save on their energy bills this year. And in fact, we were just discussing the very hot weather that they've had and how that's affecting what's happening for him. So, welcome, Frank. And on the investor side, we are very, very fortunate to have the founding partner of Apprentice Ventures, Vincent or Vince Burke, but also to note that Vince has that entrepreneur itch, and maybe still. So Vince built FlowTrack prior to Apprentice Ventures. And FlowTrack is a network security analytics company where he applied his doctoral research in machine learning to threat detection at enterprise scale. And it was acquired by Riverbed Technologies. Congratulations. And after that, he served as CTO before returning to support early stage founders. So, with that, let's move along right into our conversation today. One, want to thank you, all of you who joined us, but also those of you who took the time to submit questions. We've incorporated some of those, but we'll also be bringing those forward and offering Q&A time. So, with that, we'll get started first of all with what I personally feel we all should get on the same page with how we're viewing and defining AI. So I want to start first of all. We'll start with you, Frank, to have you provide to us how you define AI and when did you first really bring AI into your daily work?
Sure, sure. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to participate today. So we started our company in Rochester in 2020, working with NYSERDA right away. Now we work with Con Edison and their demand response programs. But the way that we think about AI is how we incorporate it into our product and also into our business operations. So we use machine learning within our product and some of our processes. But apart from that, we also use generative AI. So the LLMs that have recently come out, as well as all the agentic tooling around that. So not just chat, not just chatting, let's say chat GPT, but also all the agentic workflows around that. So now not just chatting, but also enabling processes across the business using those agents in the business.
Okay, great. All right. Well, flip it over to you, Vince. Would love to hear your perspective on how we should be thinking about defining AI and your engagement with it, which obviously sounds like it's been quite a while for you.
Yeah, so that's well, I started out 20 years ago getting a PhD in machine learning and AI. So that doesn't make me any better of a prompt engineer than anyone who's more recently started in this. Yeah, I mean, I'll start by defining AI in, at least the bit of AI that we're excited about, right? Because if we think about sort of the wider group of machine learning, technologies, right, a set of heuristic technologies we've used over the better part of 75 years, right? Like AI and the neural networks that we use today are essentially mathematical algorithms that are able to take natural language as input, then focus on the words that are important, and then subsequently craft sort of output sentences that like go really well together with what we put into it, right? Into that original context. And if you think of it as a mathematical algorithm, then then it does an amazingly compelling job of convincing us that it is that it's talking, right? That's and so from that perspective, it's a tool, right? Because if we think about like how computers were 40 years ago, only the experts could write computer programs. Then we got compilers, and then a little bit later we got higher level languages, and then we started working on frameworks, right? Like, and if you look at what software development was like 2 years ago, it was like assembly out of components. But you still kind of needed to know what those components were. And if we look at what AI has brought to us today, is an ability for almost anyone to define in natural language what they want the computer to do. And then if given some constraints, if you do that right, it'll do it. Why is that transformative? It's transformative because now a founder that has never operated a computer before or written a line of code can all of a sudden say, it's like, hey, you know what? I'm working in this industry, which is purely mechanical, physical, right, intellectual, but has nothing to do with computers. But I think if I built this piece of software, this industry would get so much better, either lower cost, optimize, whatever outcomes we would speak of. And they can go and build that. So from a ecosystem of startups and founders, this is completely transformative, because people can now go build solutions where they prior could not. And those that we wouldn't see as traditional SaaS company founders or technology company founders now can be very successful at it, right? So it is as if a flip has been switched. So that would be sort of my take on the amazing development that we've seen in the last sort of 2 years.
So sometimes when I think about how broad the opportunity is, it's a little overwhelming. So for this next area I'd like to discuss, it would be great if we can kind of bring it down into what does this really mean in terms of, Frank, let's start with Meltech. Where does AI touch your core value chain, whether it's from the acquisition and operations to the product area, or any aspects you want to talk about? Would love to hear about that, and perhaps reflecting on how you were thinking about it in terms of monetization and where that's really affecting you. So if we can get down to some brass tacks, I think I can start to wrap my head around it better.
Yeah, so our use of AI has changed over time. So we first started using AI a couple years ago. So when ChatGPT came out, and it has really changed over time, we started using GitHub Copilot for coding, and then Microsoft 365 Copilot in various processes. But recently, in the past 6 months, Claude Cowork has come out. We've started using that really across different aspects of our business. So from operations to marketing to finance to product development and product management. So that includes, adding or creating new content for marketing. It includes new financial operations, so really closing out our books at the end of the month, or for analyzing our business performance, or with product management, analyzing what are our users doing. So analyzing product data, logs, seeing what parts of the product our customers are engaging with, what is going right, what is going wrong, and then also what features we should build. So what kind of feedback are we getting from our customers? What do they want to see? and then using these tools to create new specs or even, building new features itself. But really, it touches all aspects of our business, from the operation side, helping us do more with less, helping us increase our productivity. So we have a small team, and with these tools, we've been able to 10x our productivity, whether that's from building our software or from what we can do each month. Each person on our team now has much more capacity to do much more. So yeah, so it ranges from, operations, finance to product development, product management, really all aspects of our business.
And I'm curious, Frank, you mentioned, sort of the 10x factor. Are you actually quantifying from productivity, say around creating marketing content using AI versus not? Are you literally trying to inject that kind of quantification into it?
Yeah, so it's the clearest value is really with our product management. So seeing KPIs like how long it takes to resolve an issue, how long it takes to, when we spot a problem, how long does it take to finish or fix that issue? In that scenario with our product management, analyzing those logs, it's really easy to quantify that value. But on the operations side, really, we've been able to increase, the number of RFPs that we're responding to, our responsiveness for various things. And we are adding KPIs to that. How long it takes us to respond to customer help requests, what's our mean time to resolution for various things. And we are materially improving those KPIs across the business since we've been adopting these tools.
Yeah, that's great to hear that you've got the numbers to back it up and motivate people around use of it. So Vince, what kind of technologies and tools are you looking to see companies using? Obviously, Frank's just talked about a lot of different applications, but what is it you hope to hear when you start to talk to a founder?
Yeah, and you mean like sort of at the stage of already using AI in the right way. I, and this is going to be a theme I think for today, and I think it's going to be a theme going through the years. It's like when we look at what AI is enabling, right? Like like think of it like before World War II, nobody had. Only like the doctor had an automobile, right? Like those of high income levels were able to buy an automobile. Then after World War II, with the excess manufacturing capacity, right, assembly lines, all of a sudden, all of us could have automobiles, right? And so the advantage goes away, right? Like then the only thing that matters is how much gasoline does your automobile use to get a mile down the road. And so you start to see that shift in efficiency. Like right now, we're still in a phase where AI can be the thing that puts you ahead. I think in a year from now, it's essentially like if you haven't adopted, it's like, being in the industry without a smartphone. I just wouldn't believe anyone would do that anymore, right? That's just part and parcel of the individual that we are today, right? So there's going to be there's going to be a period where everyone is going to be like AI is going to be understood to be part, like what Frank's saying, part of operational processes, but also part of the product you offer, right? Like, whether whether you're selling car parts and people want an easier way to search, you operationalize that, or whether you are looking at KPIs, right? The kinds of KPIs that Frank's talking about right now about his business are typically not available to a startup, but now they are because, built this stuff really easily, right? So as the differentiator goes away, the next question is going to become, how are you extracting value? And that's going to all come down to something. And, I look for this fairly aggressively, is how are you manage the content that you're feeding into your AI so that it is useful for you. And I think that as we look at where the developments are going to go for startups and for big companies, is that the hierarchy of how you manage the context that goes into the AI is going to be the differentiating factor. If you don't manage that well, the AI is not going to work well for you. And you don't, right? Like you're going to get a low mile per gallon. If you do that really carefully and you're very deliberate about that, then you're going to get a very high mile per gallon. Your value per token, per call is going to be much higher. And so that's very specifically where I look for. It's like how is that AI used, and how do I see that they're smart about it in a way that will give them additive value for relatively low unit costs.
So that's really interesting because it means it's not just that I'm using the tool and I'm done and I just keep repeating that sequence, but it sounds like you want to see that I'm using that tool. And then if it's my marketing content, I'm really measuring it back against what, response that's getting. If it's in my product development, how is that improving it? And how am I continuously adding to the content that I'm putting into that AI instead of it just being the one time only and the tool looks the same every time.
But also in what you don't put in, right? Like this is, I mean, this is a material question. I think that we're even seeing that in the software world, right? Like the cost of producing features has effectively gone to zero. It's like I can think of the feature, I can add it. Except that, when I pick up my phone in the morning and all my apps have updated and all my buttons are in the wrong place, I get all frustrated, right? We have to have a deliberate process of deciding what does not go in, right? Like what constitutes that core functionality. I think in the long run, it's going to come down to seeing where the effective use of the AI is being made and where it's not adding value, right? Like it's a simple ROI calculation. These things are not cheap.
Well, and maybe it's to the next question. I'll jump to covering that with you, Vince, because I'm wondering, it's not cheap. When do you prefer that startups keep AI efforts very lean and versus investing heavily in that expense?
Yeah. So, okay. So I said ROI calculation, right? Like if I think about, you know, one of the most common mistakes I see startups make is that most people have worked in bigger companies, right? If you're a startup of two people, you've worked in a company with 25 people, you might be inclined to start adopting infrastructure in a similar manner, right? In a similar manner as that you're used to from a 25-person company. So you've got you're talking to maybe 24 prospects. So then you're going to go get yourself a copy of Salesforce because that's what the pros use, right? And that's like, well, that's a stupid use of money, right? Like these days, in fact, as a startup, you can get tremendous amount of capability by simply building the software that you think you need yourself in a bespoke way for yourself, right? AI in many ways is enabling bespoke software. So on an operational side, right? Because there's obviously the question needs to be answered on your product side as well. But on an operational side, um, you know, using AI to build out just the capabilities that you need and not relying on expensive other software packages that you otherwise would have bought is actually a very smart way to go about it. And your token spent there is almost right. That's the ROI there is like 30x or something. If you look at your product and building out a product that is effective for your client base, there you have to be extremely careful with exactly what your unit economics look like. So what I mean by that, right, is that if I build a solution and it's heavily reliant on Claude Opus and these premium models, premium tokens, and it works really, really well. Well, there kind of is a limit to how cheap it's going to be, and we know we're not at the at cost yet there, right? Like they're basically the tokens you use are subsidized by the investors into the large inference companies. So subsequently, we know that cost is going to go up, and I've heard there's been discussion of look, token spend is going to come down because it's going to commoditize. The problem is there is a limit to how cheap a token, right? How cheap inference can be because these machines take a lot of electricity. We know that, right? I mean, this is in the news all over the place. And so we're not at that point yet, right? And so we're going to have to see, how that develops. So if you build a product that's heavily AI reliant, simply because it's now easier for you to do the thing you want to do for your customer, but in building that, your unit economics are like you're barely break even. Okay, now what happens if the token cost goes up, right? Your company is no longer viable. So at the product build out, I have a very different philosophy. You have to be very selective on, what is the right use? Is there a different model I can use? Is there even localized models I could use that are much smaller? Does it do a good enough of a job so that you have just enough AI for the use case?
Okay, well, that's pretty out there to suggest we don't need those expensive CRM for our small startup, but On the other hand, definitely maybe need to think a little bit bigger and in a different way when you're looking at your product. So Frank, would love to hear about how you've thought about the tools and technologies, and then after that, kind of have you tell us, I don't know if it's the painful truth, but what it's been like to actually implement those with your team and your customers.
Yeah, so it's been an iterative process. So over time, we've thought about, like what Vince just mentioned about building our own tools versus buying some tools. So we have built some of these tools ourselves, but we've quickly found that the maintenance isn't worth it. So the amount of time that we spent to build it after deciding that, it turned out to be more than the subscription cost, depending on the software. So at first we decided to basically, build everything, everything that we use. But then pretty quickly we realized that there's some things, it just makes sense to buy it and not go through the maintenance cost of it. But uh, there is actually a big change right on the horizon, starting on June 1st, actually, of this year. GitHub Copilot's changing their pricing model from a flat subscription fee to a token-based consumption model. And, this is causing us to reevaluate a lot of the processes that we actually just went and built. So a lot of the agentic workflows that I was describing earlier, it turns out they use a lot of tokens. But the previous billing was on a per request billing model, and so it was very cost effective. But now with the pricing change starting on June 1st, a lot of these workflows are going to be cost prohibitive. So there are some things that now they seem cheap while the pricing was like that. But now that the pricing is changing, we have to reevaluate a lot of these things to look at efficiency. So if you use AI in your product, it's no longer like a traditional SaaS model. Now you have consumption or usage-based pricing in your cost structure. So if you were already on a thin budget, it might break. Your budget might break really soon. And that's right around the corner. So there's a lot of these models that are becoming prohibitively expensive, but right now, a lot of these tools are still cost effective. So right now, the Claude Cowork platform that we're using that just came out recently, now it integrates with a lot of our other software platforms that we use, like QuickBooks or Apollo for contact information, or Sentry for error reporting, or Posthog for product data. So now instead of just chatting with the chat, we can run queries against, say, our product data or different things. So every Monday morning, we have an agentic workflow that creates a report for us that analyzes all of our product data from the last week. And it creates a higher quality report than we spent, a year iterating on before while we were manually creating these reports. Now, they have off-the-shelf skills in Claude Cowork with plugins that connect to these different tools. So now we can, set up recurring workflows that run off of timer triggers. So say like every Monday morning, run a report based of our QuickBooks or product data, see what our users are doing in our platform, how are things working, and create a report that we can start acting on with actionable recommendations every Monday morning. But as I mentioned, it was an iterative process, so that over time we had to learn how to use these tools. And we have had to teach each other on the team how to use these tools. So over the past couple of months, we started having a weekly meeting where we all get together and show each other what is the latest thing that you learned. What is the latest report that you created? What is the latest connection that you use or the latest skill? And so each person teaches each other what the latest thing is. and then that is usable across the business, whether that's automating browser control or automating reports, scheduled workflows, agentic workflows. We teach each other, and that way we are all on top of what has recently come out. Then we can start getting value from these different tools right away. But we had to learn along the way to internalize that, to create those processes. Um, and that wasn't easy. Each person has their own level of understanding, and some of these are technical topics that for some people might be more difficult. But if we have each person teaching each other, every single person on the team can start using these tools right away.
So I'm really pleased to hear you talk about sort of the adoption factor here, because there's a question around workforce and the sort of the readiness for all of this. So maybe when you think about your current team and maybe when you're adding people, how are you addressing, I guess I would say maybe no experience with it, so lack of experience, but also maybe perhaps some resistance, if you ever see that? And are you able to kind of look at that in your current team and as well during your recruitment process, and how are you addressing that?
We have had resistance along the way, different opinions, but I've tried to lead by example and experiment with the latest tools as soon as they come out, and then really show the value of that thing. So, implementing it right away and then showing, say, that report that I created that, a year ago would have taken us 6 months to create. Things like that, you can really show the value right away. And so you can encourage other people to use it, using or showing the actual results of what you're able to create. And these are tools that every person on the team can start leveraging really immediately. So say when we started using Claude Cowork, we started getting value right away. So it has off-the-shelf plugins with platforms that we already use. So really easy to connect. And then each person across the business has been able to leverage them right away. But it is brand new. So we have a lot of conversations with people that, this is an alien concept. So when I talk to other founders at other startups, it's still new. But it requires experimentation. You have to experiment with the latest tools and start seeing the value for yourself. But it exists today. It's not in the future. It's right now. So you have to start using it right now.
Yeah, and it sounds like the peer-to-peer approach and the showing value. I mean, those are just great ways to think about it. And another question that came in that I think speaks to sort of where we are in our conversation now. So we've talked about all kinds of ways to use AI, but I'm wondering, Vince, from an investor perspective, how do you think about a company using it for productivity versus when it's really providing a strategic advantage?
Yeah, you mean you mean when AI forms a moat that others can't easily cross is what you're asking, I think, right? And
Mhm.
so, um, we all have access to these various AI tools, and I think Frank illustrated, right, like there is no one right way to bring in AI technology for operationalization other than just go and use it, right? And that means enable the people in the business, right? And these are operational um, efficiencies. But you know that one way or another, everyone is going to gather these operational efficiencies using AI, right? Whether they do that through acquiring a product, whether they do that through building it themselves. Like, people know how the business works. They're going to be able to optimize once they see how they can use that. From a perspective of how do you turn it into a moat, the moat for a startup is not their use of AI, because I have to assume that, like, if you're not thinking about this new type of human computer interface, you're not actually doing it right. Um, the moat instead is in how hard is it to obtain the data that is needed to provide the solution that you're building with AI, right? And it sounds like a data moat. There's a second sort of component to this. But if I think about sort of, like, let's keep going on the car analogy, right? If I want to build a car in my garage, I can go and do that. And the internet's full of like examples of like, well, here's how you attach your wheel to a car or whatever. Don't forget the brakes. But if I want to make 10,000 of them, I'm going to need an assembly line. Now, assembly lines are very specific, right? There's a lot of tribal knowledge associated with building an assembly line that's not available easily, and I have to sit down and really think about that, right? So there is procedural process, execution, or data intellectual property that is like tribal. And if you have a lot of that, you probably are in a position where you have a moat, right? And we have to test that, obviously, and you have to test it and think about it. There's one other area I'll mention, and that's how likely is it? Like I said, one thing I said earlier, a statement I made earlier is, AI permits bespokeness of software, right? Like we can build bespoke software very easily, which means that people that in prior times would have purchased a piece of software might now build it themselves, right? This reporting capability, that tracking, whatever it is, right? Like I'm gonna see if I can build this myself, as opposed to seeing if I can buy, I don't know, SAP, Oracle, or some other expensive solution for it. That isn't true for all industries. There's many industrial industries where the likelihood of founders sitting there and saying, "Hey, I'm going to build this myself," as opposed to buying it from someone, is much lower. Right? And you talk about the cybersecurity industry. Well, your moat better be a data moat. You talk about more industrial areas, your moat probably is going to be, people that are in trucking and logistics are not super likely to go and build this themselves, right? And that's the spectrum upon which we need to measure what constitutes defensibility in startups and AI.
So maybe we can chase that down a little bit more, because it really leads us into kind of the due diligence question. As you mentioned, you need to test, what exactly you're being told by these founders in their business, and the data sets and the data provenance really becomes, sort of an issue. The content that you talked about and how that's being added in. So how are you diving into the weeds during the due diligence process on this question?
Well, it actually starts with it starts like one level higher. Like, how is AI used in the business, and is that in and of itself novel, right? Because that's the process mode. Next, the question is the problem that's being solved evidently worth solving, which, in many cases is yes, where you don't want to find out that there's a price point so low that their unit economics of the company will never work, right? Because then nobody will make money in the long run, even if it's a worthwhile problem to solve. And that is material, right? Like, think about video processing still takes a tremendous amount of cycles, right? Natural language processing does as well. And we'll probably touch on this later again. And then the next one is the industry, because in certain industries, right, like for instance, we invested in a company that's that analyzes sewage treatment data, right? This actually turns out to be a very sophisticated problem because, there's a lot of environmental factors, and sewage treatment relies on bacterial cultures functioning, et cetera. And there's a lot of knowledge there, again, that's tribal. It's not easy to compile. You go Google that, you're going to find some general indicators, to the effect of what I just said. But the actual real knowledge that's needed, what it means if the volumes are up or the temperatures are down, like all these things are very specific. It's like, okay, well, if you have 100,000 data points on that, you probably have something that absolutely nobody else has, right? And so then that automatically, or not automatically, but that is very likely a defensibility mode. Combine that with the fact that people that operate industrial complexes like that are probably less likely to sit down and say, let me see if I can build an image recognition AI platform. As easy as that these days is to do, is actually much lower. That spectrum moves completely if you look at other industries, right? Where in prior times, the SaaS software had in and of itself, the only defensibility was the process architecture of the software itself. Where you store, and if I look at those, it's like essentially, especially in technology heavy industries, the only kind of companies that certainly have a moat are those that have a large infrastructure component, right? Like, whether that be technology infrastructure, or compute, or um, inference, or storage, right? Like that is always going to remain relevant and required. And so you have to look at moats much more from the perspective of, could they build it? Yes. Then what sets them apart? Well, the infrastructure itself is a large capital investment, and so that's not going to easily get caught. So that equation, Marnie, has basically changed shockingly in the last 12 months, I would say. Like, this is about the most change I've seen, in the philosophy of investing, and how do you define defensibility on a company today, as it was, as little as a year ago.
And does that mean you've brought different people into the due diligence process, have a different time commitment to that part of the due diligence?
Yeah, because basically what it essentially means is you look for companies that essentially have the best founder market fit you can, right? And what's the problem, right? Well, I'm a software guy. I don't necessarily know a lot about waste management or the trucking industry and areas like that, right? So the question really becomes, how good of a solution is this given the industry, as opposed to this is just another verticalized SaaS platform.
Mhm.
Collect the data and present it in an interesting way. I mean, we can all build that now.
So Frank would love to hear you opine on this whole area of due diligence and your experience with it when you've been talking to investors.
Yeah, well, the questions have changed over time, significantly. Recently, a lot more questions on AI and how we're using it in the business. Um, but also, over the past, year and a half or so, there has been other changes in, the climate tech industry. And we've since shifted from, framing ourselves as a, climate tech to more energy software. And data is the foundation of our business. And then, you know, AI on top of that really makes that value pop, really accelerates the value of that data. But yeah, over time, the questions have changed a lot. A lot more focus on AI.
And it was certainly a burning question for me, and it came up in the chat about whether you build those capabilities in-house or you outsource. I know for us, any software company, we're always looking at, do you have that talent in-house or outside, and what is your plan in the future? So, Vince, what are your thoughts on your preferences there?
My preferences, in-source versus outsource. The uh, in a startup, one of the biggest values you can have is that you're working closely together with the people that you're building this with, because to there's more to a startup than just the technology you build, right? There is chemistry between people, common understanding, there's energy, there's a whole bunch of things we can't simulate well with AI. So I say less, especially for the smaller companies, keep them together.
Frank, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I'll comment from, my experience. We have gone both routes. And over the past uh 4 or so years, we brought all of our software development in-house. And it's been, you know, uh I wouldn't recommend any startup to contract out software development, especially not nowadays. You can build an MVP pretty quickly with these AI tools, and then demonstrate the value from that MVP.
Mhm.
Um, and building in-house versus building or outsourcing it, you retain everything, the knowledge, the team builds the experience with the product. If you're unable to build the MVP in-house, I know searching for a technical co-founder, is very difficult, but uh, I basically transitioned to a technical co-founder, and I lead our product development now. But over the past few years, I had to learn that, and we ended up building everything in-house. But um, nowadays, any founder that really can put your thoughts on paper, if you can, iterate with say Claude and then really come up with a list of specs. Like you can get a very, very detailed list of specs on your product and then go from there, spec-driven development. But I personally wouldn't recommend anyone to outsource development.
Okay, well, sounds like you're both on the same side of that conversation. Fair enough. Especially, I think what might be most unnerving is how much this is changing every single day. So when we think about startups and investors trying to connect with each other, interested to hear, Vince, your thoughts on how our founders should be thinking about connecting with the right investors and how they should be talking about their AI.
Yeah. Okay. So those are two. That's two questions
It is.
in one. So, um, uh, you know, investors are more than money. And I mean, I'm saying something that's a complete anecdote, but it's completely true as well, right? Like this is uh, if you want to build a company and an investor puts in money, that investor is very invested in making that money have a good outcome, right? Because investors have their own investors. So what does the investor add? Well, the investor adds hopefully experience or a view of the market or a higher level view, or has a group of companies similar, right? Like this is why investors tend to invest in similar stage companies, right? And bring that experience to bear, right? And that's when you're looking for investors, you're not just looking for money, you're looking for people that can actually be additive. Whether they join your board or whether your company is too small, they don't join the board, but they can advise, right? Like um, if you have an investor that you feel you don't feel that chemistry with, right? Like you get on the phone with me and I'm talking about something and you're like, gosh, this guy's like way off his rocker, it's totally wrong. Then no matter how much I'd like to invest in your business, you should be taking that money, right? Like because there won't be a fun. You need to find investors who you'll be excited about talking regularly with and validating your assumptions and how do you think this is going to play in the market? Have you seen this sort of thing before? Or I need a good co-founding CTO. Do you know anyone? Right? Like if that chemistry with your investor isn't working, you shouldn't be. You should qualify your investors as much as they're qualifying you. Right? You should diligence them as much as you diligence as they figure out if your company is the right fit.
Yeah, no, fair enough indeed. So Frank, what are your thoughts on this, especially when you think about a business that has an AI moat, and how are you connecting with investors, and what are some of the main things that you're wanting to highlight when you're talking to those investors or would-be investors?
Yeah, well, so we've really seen the inflection with AI over the past 6 months or so, and everything's changed in the past 6 months with the newest tools. Now we are focusing more on how we are using these tools, one in our products for product development, accelerating our product development, and then also expanding what our product features include. So say AI insights or other things like that. And then also how we're doing more with less. So we are extending our runway. We are able to get more output from less people. We don't need a very large team. We can have a smaller team and get much more output and really, uh, you know, expand with a small team from there. But that's really been kind of how the conversation has changed over the past few months.
Interesting. I and just taking a look to see, been trying to cover some of the chat questions. If anybody has any new ones you want to pop in. Um, I think I will, while we're waiting to see if there's any more from the audience. Katrina, I don't know if you had any from the list from before you wanted to add. I've been trying to check those a bit, but I do see a question around talent. in-house again. And I guess I want to circle back because it is changing so quickly. So how can you have investors? How can you have founders? How can you have teams who really are all up to speed on this? And I'm curious if there's any red flags on either side. Just as it was mentioned before, if the investor you're talking to has no idea what you're talking about, maybe that's not might cut that conversation short. But I am wondering how you feel we can bring the talent along quickly enough to match how rapidly the startups can move forward and how quickly investors want to put money into it.
And you mean like the talent that works at the business?
Yeah. And Vince, I don't know if you've seen on the investor side. I mean, we have a lot of investors saying, I have LPs who want to put money, who want me to put money into AI, but how much does that investor actually know? So I think we're all sort of wondering how do we keep ourselves up to speed?
Yeah. So okay. So I'll make a slightly general comment there, right? Like the technology is changing fast, but actually really it isn't. It's the ways in which we're figuring out how to use the technology is what's developing so fast, right? Like, oh, I can apply it like this. Oh, imagine, um, the only way, and the funny thing is that it doesn't necessarily need to be experienced software people that need to do that. It's actually people that understand the problem domain better seem to be the ones that are best suited to coming up with solutions for it. I mean, yeah, like I'm not going to build an assembly line with that guy, but he does definitely have the right idea on how to solve that problem. So, from that perspective, the interactions you have as an investor with the startup founder quickly weeds out whether or not they're sophomoric about that, right? Like if they, and I'll give you just straight up, like, if I, here's some things that, like, if I hear this sort of stuff, I like walk away, right? It is when someone is talking about AI as like, oh, the AI itself has transformed the problem. And usually what that means when I dig in, this is like the solution they're providing is based on the number of prompts they're giving the large language model, and then the output from that is given back to the customer. So that in and of itself, unless there's huge tribal knowledge encoded in there, is no longer a defensible solution, and it shows that you don't understand how to use it. Right? However, if we see deep domain understanding, no overconfidence, right, and a really good sense of how to manage the context and how to make use of AI as a tool in one or more places in the hierarchy, then it's a good. And I'll give you an example. We invested in a climate tech company that looks at electricity consumption in specifically in the food industry and other industries as well. They had a deep understanding of energy usage and energy use cost, and what equipment uses a lot of energy for what job, like things that I couldn't Google, but probably right. And they very, very specifically decided to use a small language model to do the analysis on energy consumption and the usage patterns, and then they use the large language model to like have the interaction with you, right? Like as I don't know, you bake bread. Do you know a ton about energy consumption in your business? Maybe not, but you can say it's like, look, here's the equipment I've got. Here's my electric bill. And they demonstrated an ability to thoroughly understand what it is that business owner, that their customer is going to want out of this tech. Then they decided what kind of AI to use at different places, and they showed a lot of understanding of the value that the AI was going to bring while keeping unit economic cost in under control, right? And then you see something like that, and you're like, okay, you guys truly have understood how you can make the best use of it. Granted, your point is like, how is that going to evolve? Yeah, it's going to evolve, but it gives me then the confidence that when there's an evolution or a next generation of AI technology, they'll also be intelligent about adopting that and how they're going to make use of it, right?
So when you're evaluating the moat, you're really looking at their ability to continue sustaining and deepening that moat. It sounds like not just looking at intellectual property or data that's unique right now. You look at their ability to continue evolving that.
Yeah, because the best hope you have, right, as when it comes to like talent use of AI and how are they ready for the future, the best bet you have is the people that are in the business. And if the people in the business show a deep understanding of how to apply this technology, you can have some level of confidence they're going to be intelligent about that again in the future and not, you know, make poor decisions. They show no understanding of the AI technology and how it benefits them, and pros, cons, how it's best used. Then you can't have any confidence that they'll pick this knowledge up and make the right decision, 6 months from now.
So I'm curious, Frank, if you've had a good example of a customer story, perhaps that you've shared with an investor or you share as part of kind of here's a highlight of my value proposition and how I have this unique ability to use customer data to solve the problem in your products today.
Yeah, so we have a lot of small customers, over 6,000. And we have been able to lower our mean time to resolution for customer issues, for say help requests, customer service requests. Also, we've been able to identify problems that our users are having before they say anything. So oftentimes, customer, if they send us an email saying, why did this happen? Or, I participated in a demand response event and I didn't get the rewards that I expected. We can see before if there are any issues. And so we've been able to resolve those issues before the customers reach out. So
Fun.
historically, we've waited obviously for the customers to reach out, and then we find out, oh, actually, 100 customers have this issue. But now we have agents that are analyzing our logs, and alerting us to issues before customers ever say anything, and then we resolve them. So our number of help requests has drastically dropped, and then the amount of time it takes to resolve those help requests has drastically dropped as well.
Fantastic. Well, I'd like to finish up with each one of you giving one practical action you'd recommend our deep tech founders should do, say, in the next quarter to strengthen their AI moat approach.
Well, my one recommendation would be to download Claude Cowork today and then create an agent before the end of the week. So one scheduled task, one workflow by the end of the week, and then each week for the rest of the quarter, create a new one. And then by the end of the quarter, you'll have 6 agents working for you. And if each person on your team does it, imagine the productivity increase you'll get by the end of this quarter. And you can start today, actually.
Phenomenal. All right, everybody to work. Vince, how about you? And if you're willing, how do people get a hold of you?
I'm sure that it's somewhere on the webinar website how to get a hold of
All
me, but
right, if
otherwise
you're,
it's
we're happy to
usually
share it.
LinkedIn. Yeah, yeah. So I want to. So the funniest thing is that with all this AI adoption, AI technology, I find myself telling founders often to pump the brakes, which sounds like really, really counterintuitive, right? And I wanted to share that story as a word of advice. I'm gonna have to do this in 60 seconds here. So here's what I think is going to happen in the next year or so. Like everybody's loving this technology; it's working really well. Everybody has it. Like junior people, older people in the organization, people are trying and adopting almost anything that they can with this. The thing that we're going to find is, right, especially when it comes to software writing, it's all about managing the context that you put inside the large language model. If you don't manage that well, you're going to get garbage in, garbage out. Now, right now, we're putting a little bit in and a little bit more in. Now, take this a year from now. Everything in the kitchen sink, anything came out of Jira, Confluence, Notion, DevOps, wherever you were storing data is now going to be in your context, and everyone's going to have done it differently. And we're going to find ourselves, even in a startup with 6 people, where everyone has adopted all these processes in AI. It's going to all look different, and you're going to have a whole new kind of headache. So I say to people, pump the brakes and think about if there's any kind of governance process you want to put in place around AI and adoption of AI and writing code with AI, and make sure that it is at least roughly following the same set of rules in your company, right? That everybody follows roughly the same set of principles. So that's what. So think about those principles. They're not hard. There's many examples online, but that's the last word of advice I would give.
Brilliant, brilliant. I want to thank both Frank and Vince and the whole audience for joining today. I want to thank NYSERDA, of course, for making this all possible. But great words of wisdom and obviously more to come. This is only the beginning of this revolution. And we hope that all of you will also join us for our next webinar, which stay tuned. We'll get the date and info out to you soon. But again, Vince and Frank, thank you so much and look forward to staying in touch.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.
Thank you.